Good afternoon, everyone. Let's get, I'm going to pause just another couple, 3 seconds while everybody continues to come into the waiting room or come in from the waiting room. Before we get started, we've got a pretty packed agenda today, so we're gonna move right through. You know, we have always the ultimate goal of actually getting you out of here at the time we say that we're gonna get you out of here. So we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today, for choosing to be here with us this afternoon for this community revitalization through Brownfields redevelopment, assistance, tools, and resources for Nebraska communities webinar. We are recording this webinar, and recording of the webinar along with the slides that we use today will be available on the KSU TAB website in a few days. So I'm going to put a link to that in the chat box for you right now, so that end of the week, early next week, you should be able to have access to all of the materials that we share today, along with the recording of this webinar. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that everybody's very, very used to Zoom now and how things work and appropriate Zoom etiquette and all of that. But so we'll just have a few quick reminders to make sure this is a very pleasant experience for everyone that's here. All participants should be muted. I tried to mute everybody before you came in, but do me a favor and just double check that you are muted. And please stay muted throughout the duration of the webinar. If there's time at the end, when we go into questions, we may ask that you unmute yourselves at that point, but until we get there, just please stay muted. Also, please make sure that your video remains off during the remainder of this presentation. Again, up until the end when we get to kind of the Q&A parts. And finally, we do encourage you to ask questions throughout this event today. So if someone's saying something and you've got a question about it, feel free to ask. We encourage you to use the chat feature, which is located in the Zoom toolbar. So we would prefer that all questions be sent to everyone. However, if you're uncomfortable sharing your question with the whole audience, you can select a specific speaker to send your question to, but then we will kind of answer that question publicly without necessarily saying who it's from. Okay, so we have a really great team gathered here today. I'm Jennifer Clancy, and I'm the KSU TAB Services Manager for EPA Region 7, which is the EPA region that you all are in. I am joined by Taryn Horn, the NDEE Brownfields Coordinator, Jennifer Morris with EPA Region 7 Brownfields team, Sabina Martin, who's a KSU TAB partner, and we are really, really thrilled to have with us today Tobias Templemeyer as our special guest speaker. Tobias is the city administrator for the city of Beatrice, and he is going to be sharing with you the city's experiences of making use of many of the resources that you're going to learn about today. As I mentioned, we've got a whole lot of ground we're going to cover, so we're going to move through it pretty quickly. Taryn's going to get us started by talking about what brownfields even are and why they should be redeveloped in the first place. And then she'll give us an overview of the NDEE Brownfields program, followed by Jennifer, who's going to share an overview of the opportunities and resources for brownfields redevelopment available through the EPA. And then Sabina is going to talk about the KSU TAB program and the assistance tools and resources that we offer. And then Tobias is going to wrap this whole thing up by sharing how the city of Beatrice has used services provided by each of us, NDEE, EPA, and KSU TAB, for redevelopment work that's happening in his community in Beatrice. Then at the end, with whatever time is left, we have a few quick announcements. I'll ask you to complete a real quick evaluation of this webinar for me, and then we will answer your questions with any remaining time. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Taryn.
Hello. So I want to start off and make sure that we are all on the same page and actually know what a brownfield is. So the textbook definition of a brownfield is real property, the expansion, redevelopment, or reuse of, which may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant. Now, I emphasize potential presence because a site doesn't need to be contaminated in order to be labeled a brownfield. Oftentimes, it's the perception that there's something wrong with the property that prevents it from being redeveloped. These images show perfect examples of brownfields. When someone looks at a site or building like this, he or she most likely is inclined to believe there's asbestos, lead-based paint, or some type of release to the environment. Because of this perception, developers and investors tend to overlook these type of sites, and they sit idle for years. This is one way brownfields have negative impacts on your community. An environmental stigma results due to the lack of development or reuse, and this reduces the community tax base and neighboring site business investments. The properties themselves create eyesores and then can impact overall community vitality. And if left unaddressed, development then moves on to previously undeveloped land, your green space and recreational areas, and any existing environmental issues go unattended. Next slide, please. Addressing your brownfield properties can improve the economics, environment, and the health of the well-being of your community. The information in the box highlights real data that shows the benefit of redeveloping brownfields. A study completed by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, in 2020 discovered that communities with significant brownfield redevelopment resulted in 32 to 57% reduction in vehicle miles traveled, which makes sense because developing a new local business that the community needs on those brownfield properties reduces the need for individuals to travel several miles to obtain food, healthcare, or other necessities. Preserving green space by reusing already existing facilities led to 47 to 62% reduction in stormwater runoff, which helps improve water quality. And one redevelopment advantage for many of these old industrial facilities and commercial structures is that they are already conveniently located next to major highways, main thoroughfares, and often have railroad access. So once that environmental stigma is gone, they can be very attractive pieces of real estate. And a study concluded that cleaning up brownfield properties led to residential property value increases of up to 15.2% within a 1 mile radius of the site, and created between $29 and $97 million in tax revenue for local governments in 1 year alone. Next slide, please. Okay, so you may be thinking, where do I even start with redeveloping one of these properties? And that is where the NDEE Brownfields program can step in and help. The NDEE Brownfields program has various resources that serve to help remove the environmental uncertainty associated with properties, which can then help attract funding from investors and redevelopers. The first step in any redevelopment project should be to complete a phase 1 environmental site assessment. A phase 1 is beneficial because it helps identify any environment or any recognized environmental conditions associated with a property. So the contractor completing the phase 1 will search all regulatory databases and publicly available documents to identify historical uses of the property and determine if there are any records of spills or releases. The phase 1 not only helps identify the historical use of the subject property, but it helps identify any off-site facilities that may impact the environmental integrity of the site. The image on the left is an example of a regulatory database radius map, and that is part of a phase 1 report. The green star in the center is the subject property, and the map plots all facilities within a 1/4 mile, a 1/2 mile, and 1 mile from the property that show up in regulatory database. And then the report follows up with more details about each of the identified facilities. And phase 1 can help identify potential environmental concerns that might show up in a that might not show up in a regulatory database. For example, the Sanborn map image on the right was included in an assessment report we completed for one of our applicants. The Sanborn map identified the property as being a dry cleaning facility back in the 1930s. And now this is before any environmental regulations or reporting requirements were established, so there were no other records of it. And as you may be aware, historical dry cleaning facilities are known to release PCE or perc cleaner and other chlorinated solvents into underlying soils and groundwater. If it weren't for completing the phase 1, this environmental concern may never have been identified. NDEE's Brownfields program can complete the phase 1 assessments at no cost to eligible applicants. An eligible applicant is any local government, a nonprofit organization, an economic development district, basically any public entity that has an interest in redevelopment. Now, if there's a privately owned property that an eligible applicant is interested in purchasing or even just wants assessed to find out what's there to help spur development, we can still complete the phase 1. In those cases, we just need a signed access agreement by the property owner. Next slide, please. In addition to identifying environmental concerns at a property, another benefit of completing a phase 1 is that it offers some environmental liability protection if it's completed before you take ownership. On January 11th, 2002, President Bush signed the Small Business Liability Relief and Brownfields Revitalization Act, which is also known as the Brownfields Amendments or the Brownfields Bill. This act amended the current Superfund law to provide environmental liability relief to certain entities. Under Superfund, you could be liable just by virtue of ownership. So even if you didn't cause the contamination on a property, the moment you purchased it, you became responsible for it. Because the current owner could be responsible for contamination, people didn't want to purchase and invest in these old brownfields properties. So the Brownfields Bill helped resolve this situation. The act provides a host of environmental liability relief options, including for prospective purchasers who are interested in buying land that might be contaminated. One of the requirements to qualify for the liability relief is to satisfy what's called the all appropriate inquiries. All appropriate inquiries, or AAI, is the process of conducting due diligence to determine prior uses and ownership of a property and to assess conditions that might be indicative of a release of a hazardous substance. When you complete a phase 1 assessment, you are satisfying the AAA requirement to qualify for the liability protection. Next slide, please. Now, if you have a redevelopment vision or plan for an entire area, such as a downtown business district, a particular neighborhood or corridor, NDEE can conduct a brownfield inventory of the entire study area prior to any work. The inventory is very similar to a phase 1, except that it covers an entire area instead of a single property. This image is the study area for a brownfield inventory we completed for the city of Bellevue as part of their Old Town redevelopment project. The inventory report will identify properties in the study area that may pose an environmental concern. And with this information, the community can then prioritize sites and address them individually based on redevelopment plans and goals. Next slide, please. The Brownfields program also covers costs to complete phase 2 environmental site assessments, whereas phase 1 involves a lot of desktop research and non-invasive work. Phase 2 involves collecting soil, soil gas, and groundwater samples to determine if there has been a release to the environment. The pictures on the left depict one of our contractors collecting soil samples at a vacant lot in Lincoln. The property was historically owned by a railroad company, and so with this information, we knew to analyze the soil for heavy metals such as arsenic and lead, because these contaminants are commonly associated with railroad activities. If a phase 1 assessment reveals that a property used to be a former dry cleaners facility, like the Sanborn map did in one of the previous slides, then we would know to collect soil and groundwater samples to analyze for PCE and other chlorinated solvents commonly associated with dry cleaning operations. And because these solvents are volatile, we would also collect soil gas samples to determine if there's a vapor intrusion concern to future occupants of the property. And that is what is going on in the picture of the right. That picture shows a device known as a SUMA canister that is collecting soil gas to be sent to a laboratory for volatile organic compound analysis. Next slide, please. The Brownfields program also covers costs to test building materials for asbestos, lead-based paint, and the presence of mold, both on building materials and in the indoor air. For the asbestos survey, NDEE's contractor will collect samples from all accessible building materials suspected of containing asbestos for laboratory analysis. After receiving the analytical results, the contractor will then compile a final report identifying all materials that tested positive for asbestos fibers, and therefore must be properly removed and disposed of prior to any demolition or renovations. Now, if a vacant structure is going to be demolished, generally there is no need to complete lead-based paint or mold surveys because there's not going to be a risk of exposure to future occupants. But if you plan to renovate older structures instead of demolishing them, the Brownfields program can cover the cost of a lead-based paint survey that will test all painted surfaces for the presence of lead. And our mold surveys include a list of all water damage materials containing mold growth. And then tape lift samples are collected from surfaces containing mold, and the samples are analyzed for specific mold species that are capable of mycotoxin production and may pose a human health risk. The survey also includes collection of indoor air samples to determine the concentration of mold spores in the air. Next slide, please. The Brownfields program also offers financial assistance to help defray costs associated with some cleanup projects. We do have an asbestos cleanup program, and that program reimburses an applicant 50% of the total cost of asbestos removal and disposal up to $20,000. Depending on available funding each year, the Brownfields program may also assist with soil cleanup or excavation projects. For example, one year we used funding to help clean up a property that historically served as an oil refinery. Remnants of the refinery were observed on the site in the form of 2 sludge pits, and Brownfields funding and funding from NDEE's petroleum remediation section were used to cover the cost to extract the fluid from the pits and then fill them in with clean soil. Next slide, please. Okay, the next few slides, I want to highlight some projects that the Brownfields program has been involved with. They feature perfect examples of how removing the environmental concerns associated with a property can start to attract redevelopment dollars and investment. This shows the former Rialto Theater in Cozad. It was forced to close in 2008 due to unsafe building conditions. That center picture shows the roof had collapsed. And like most closed facilities, once it closed, it sat idle for many years. So the Brownfields program completed a phase 1 assessment and asbestos survey, and also assisted with asbestos removal and disposal costs so the building could be safely demolished. Next slide, please. Following asbestos removal, the city was able to obtain additional funding to pay for building demolition, and the site is now the location of a beautiful new bandstand for community gatherings and summer concerts. Next slide, please. This is the former Progress Elementary School located in Oglala. Abandoned school facilities are always a big brownfield issue because they're present in nearly every community. They always have asbestos and they take up a lot of unused space. The Brownfields program paid for a phase 1 assessment, an asbestos survey, and assisted again with asbestos removal and disposal costs so the building could be safely demolished. Next slide, please. Following NDEE's activities, several entities worked together to leverage up to $2.6 million to develop the new Kathleen Luke Public Library that opened in July 2020. Next slide, please. Another abandoned school project, the former Blue Hill Elementary School building had been sitting vacant since 2002, and Blue Hill wanted to use this location for the site of a new community pool. So the Brownfields program paid for an asbestos survey and provided additional funding for the asbestos removal and disposal so the school building could be safely demolished. Next slide, please. Following demolition, the small community with a population of less than 1,000 people was able to raise nearly $3 million for the pool project, and the new Blue Hill Aquatic Center officially opened on June 1st, 2021. Next slide, please. There are several more communities that we have assisted. However, I'm limited on time, so I'm going to end my portion of the webinar with a few Brownfields program caveats. One, there's no application deadline. It's a rolling cycle, but funding is limited each year and is generally distributed first come, first served. Unfortunately, there is nothing my program can do about recalcitrant property owners. If we do not have a copy of a signed access agreement from the property owner, we generally cannot enter the property to do any assessment or cleanup work. And just a heads up that because the Brownfields program uses federal funds to complete all of our work, there is a formal review process that we have to follow, and therefore the turnaround time for these projects is generally longer than if you were to hire your own consultant privately to do the work. And with that, I will hand it off to the next presenter.
Okay, now we're going to hear from Jennifer Morris with EPA Region 7 Brownfields program to talk about the assistance and resources that the EPA has to offer.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. I am especially pleased to join my presenters, and I love working with the folks in Nebraska. Taryn has done so much to provide for the people, and ready to move on to the next slide. Charge. Okay, so the Brownfields mission. The program is designed to empower states, tribes, communities, and other stakeholders to work together to prevent, assess, safely clean up, and sustainably reuse brownfields. I always emphasize that this is about empowering you to work together to do the things, because this is about you doing the work. This isn't about EPA coming in and doing work for you. This is about you doing the work. Of course, we're going to come in at the end and take credit. Yay, because that's what we do. Next slide, please. And the first example of that is this beautiful bridge. Many of you may recognize in Omaha. The Bob Carey Bridge is an example of one of the early redevelopments, revitalization. This is a summary of basically an overview of the program. The EPA provides the liability protection that Taryn did such a great job of explaining what the bill did, so I'm not going to go into that about the liability relief. It also established the state program that Taryn operates today and provides the funding for that state program. And in addition to that, the things I'm going to focus on today are the grants and technical assistance that are provided, and the assessment that was done in the state of in Omaha there that provided the ability to do this revitalization in Omaha. Next bridge. Next slide, next bridge. And let's talk a little bit about the assessment grants, competitive grants and technical assistance. The inventory is one of the things you can do with an assessment grant. You can characterize past uses. You can determine the existing contamination. You can do site planning and redevelopment planning. And you can do community involvement. Those are all things you can do with an assessment grant. These grants are competitive grants. And you, to be eligible, you can be a community, you can be a not-for-profit, you can be a county, local government, and economic development. You can also be a planning agency that covers a number of counties. Any sort of quasi governmental agency. So one thing that I will tell you a number of times, hopefully, is that you should read the guidelines that come out every year to know exactly what the requirements are for each of the competitive grants. This slide here is an example of the Omaha riverfront prior to what it looks like now. Number of abandoned properties that were assessed using Brownfields grants early on. Next. Another type of competitive grant is a Brownfields cleanup grant. Cleanup grants right now, thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law do not require a match. Usually they require a 20% match. So I'm telling you right now, if you have a potential cleanup project, something that's bigger than your $20,000 asbestos cleanup that Taryn can help you with, today's the day to get that project ready for a competitive grant, because those would not require a match in the next round. There's also the revolving loan fund program, which allows you to operate loans and subgrants that you would offer to do cleanups in your community. And finally, there's the multi-purpose grant, which offers both assessment and cleanup in a targeted area within a community. This is an example of the Haymarket area in Lincoln that is depicted here. Next picture, next, yes. Another type of competitive grant is the job training program. Fabulous opportunity. We need one in the state of Nebraska. This is really cool. It changes lives. People who are underemployed and unemployed are affected most dramatically by the brownfields in their community. You use the job training program to give hazardous substance and emergency response training, asbestos and lead certification, and some additional certification skills. And with 4 to 5 weeks of training, these people are graduating and getting $20 an hour wage on average. And it's really life-changing, the way that the Brownfield job training program works. Next. Now, in addition to our competitive grants, we have our technical assistance. We have, if you've heard about the phase 1s and phase 2s that the state can do, we also at EPA can do phase 1s and phase 2s with our targeted brownfields assessments. Sometimes the state can't do a really big one, or they can't do it at the type of project that you have. EPA can do it for you. And we also can, so you can contact us. We have an online application for that. And again, we have yet to turn a person away from our TBAs. Go ahead and we'll go to the next one. The other piece that we want to talk about is the technical assistance. We have an additional infusion of funding for technical assistance from the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which allows us to do all manner of planning, from site visioning and reuse to funding and funding gap closure. And here's an example that we did in Beatrice, Nebraska, where there was a manufacturing complex in the floodplain, and 2 alternative designs were created to give some idea of how they could be reused given the type of contamination at the location. So this is an example of the technical assistance. This is provided for free by our contractors. So no funds are provided to you, they are provided by us. If you're interested in our technical assistance, all you have to do is contact us, or contact Taryn and she will contact us. And we will try and make it happen. Again, that one is on a rolling basis, and we have a lot more of that available right now than we do in previous times. So please call soon if you've got a need for some technical assistance. Next. This is just a map that talks about the technical assistance to brownfields communities. This is where TAB is going to tell you what they do. So we're going to go to the next slide. Because in addition to what K-State TAB does, there's a bunch of other technical assistance providers that provide specific types of technical assistance. And I wanted to point out a couple of them. First is the one in the center, the Equitable Development and Brownfields Planning by Groundwork USA. If you are needing some specific help with reaching your environmental justice communities, Groundwork USA is a partner that specifically targets that kind of community outreach. And then if you're specifically interested in the job training program and want to know more about it, that HMTRI, that is the one that you're specifically wanting to know more about. And then finally, that one in the corner, the Brownfields Training Conference. Next slide, please. Da, 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 da. Next slide, please, with my fanfare. Yes, that's right. That's going to be in Detroit, Michigan. In August, and you're all invited August 8th to Detroit, Michigan to enjoy the Brownfields Conference, certainly more educational than what I am providing for you right now. Next slide, please. And there are some tools and some information on the EPA website. In addition to the grants, in addition to the funds that we've given to the states to help you, in addition to the technical assistance and contracts that we've got tons of resources and tools that you can access yourself on our website. So when you're available to click on this presentation, once it's posted, you'll be able to click on this and it will take you to this land revitalization page, and there will be all of these tools and guides and things that you will have access to. And I encourage you, please surf around on the Brownfields webpage, because there are just there's a ton of a wealth of information there, including information about redevelopment in rural communities and guides that are targeted for your community. Go ahead, next page. And I offer you thank you for listening to me. If you have the need to reach any team member of EPA Region 7, that is R7_Brownfields at EPA.gov. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. In case y'all didn't see it, I just dropped that direct link to the EPA Land Revitalization Toolkit in the chat box, just to make sure you have access to it in case something happens in the matrix when the slides go up onto the website. So
thank you, Jen.
Put it in there for you. All right, so Sabina Martin is now going to talk about the assistance and resources that we at K-State TAB are able to offer to those of you in Nebraska and the other states that we cover.
All right, thank you, Jen. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about TAB, what we can do for you for free. I'm going to say that right up front. So TAB stands for Technical Assistance to Brownfields. It's a mouthful, so I'll just say TAB. TAB is a nationally funded program by the US EPA. So every community in the United States, including Alaska and Hawaii, where I would love to work right now, has access to free TAB services. So what we do is we assist communities that have brownfields issues with the assessment, the cleanup, redevelopment process. And note that I say process here, so we do not perform site assessments. We do not perform cleanups. And we certainly are not redevelopers who come into your community and redevelop a process property. But we can help you through the process. We can provide guidance and expertise and make it happen that way, hopefully. So as I said before, our services are free. Any TAB service provider, and there are 6 of us that you can see here on that map, color-coded. All the services are provided for free to communities through the EPA grants that we all have. So K-State TAB services the area here in these different shades of purple. So we pretty much have the entire midsection of the country. We serve 4 EPA regions, regions 6, 7, 5, and 8. What we do is we provide planning and environmental and economic development expertise. As I said before, we do webinars and workshops. We have some e-tools and, of course, online resources on the K-State TAB website. Slide, please. What we do most is, I would say, outreach and education. Communities that would like to learn more about brownfields, how to attack it, what the resources are, who they can call, what is the process, what are the steps to get from, I say, maybe an ugly duckling to a swan of a site. Community-specific assessments, that is something that is really tailored to the community. So there is no one-size-fits-all approach. So one community might need a market analysis, the other community just kind of thinking about, we have the site here, what should we do? What can we do? What does the community need to improve quality of life? So all of this is kind of under the umbrella of capacity building to enable communities to move forward with the next site that they may have without that much assistance and without delay. Because as our services are free, and I have to say, I've been associated with TAB for 20 years, we never had to turn anybody away, but it could become a scheduling issue. So if you know that you need TAB assistance, what I would recommend, contact us right away so we can schedule something and get it on the books. Not that if you are up against a deadline, you need to have something reviewed or whatever, and all of a sudden it's, well, I need it within the next month and we can't do it, right? So the sooner you contact us, the better it is. Next slide, please. So here are some of the services that we can provide, and that's not everything, that's just the sprinkling. So don't be discouraged if something you need is not mentioned on the slide, just call and we see if we can help you out. And if we can't do it, which is rare, we probably know somebody who can and can refer you to that organization. So we have everything on here from helping identifying and inventory brownfield sites. We have a tool for that, and I will touch on that just a smidgen a little bit later. Strategic planning and redevelopment visioning, that's a really popular one. A lot of communities ask for that. And that's basically where we come in. We meet with the community, with all members of the communities are invited to that. And they basically brainstorm as to the redevelopment options that might exist for a site in their mind. And then they come to a consensus, and then we usually work with landscape architects who provide conceptual drawings of that particular vision or visions, sometimes it's 2, that come out of these meetings. Market analyses, sustainability analysis. Does it make sense to do something on this site that the community envisioned to place there? Is that feasible? Or if they build something and sink a lot of money in that, they, meaning the communities, do they end up with a brownfield site in 3 or 4 years later? Workshops, we do a lot of those. Community outreach and input, yep, also. Another hot item here is help identifying funding sources, because most communities just don't have the wherewithal to really redevelop like they want to, or redevelop, period, right? So there are a lot of resources out there that can help. Jennifer mentioned the EPA Brownfields grant proposals. We cannot write them for communities, but we can review them. And again, the earlier that you know that you are going out for a Brownfields grant from EPA, let us know if you want to review or not. We review, gosh, I don't know, 60, 70, 80, maybe more proposals per grant cycle so that you can get into the queue. The e-tools on here, and you find more information on those on the website, is BIT, that's the Brownfields inventory tool. And then TAB Easy, that's a grant writing tool for assessment grants, for cleanup grants, and for the EPA multi-purpose grants. But as I said, anything else not on this list, just call. And once we get that call, we check what we can do and then move forward. Next slide, please. Outreach and education, that's, for example, a webinar like we're doing today, right? It could also be virtual or on-site workshops that maybe have the same or a slight spin on the agenda where we present all the resources available with all the appropriate speakers that would be available to tackle a redevelopment program or project. On-demand videos to be found on the KSU website. Invited presentations, that's always a good one. We'd love to come out and visit your communities. If you want us to come speak at an event, let us know. And then here on the right-hand side of the slide are the usual suspects of who we work with, right? Who we can work with. We cannot work with individual property owners. Mostly, I'd say we work with local community leadership, like the local government. We have worked a lot with regional planning commissions, economic development corporations, or organizations. So basically, except for private entities, who is a stakeholder in the brownfields process in the community. But all these entities, including private residents, private entities, could of course participate in any type of webinar or workshops that we provide. They may have land that they are, or structures that they're interested in redeveloping that qualify as a brownfield site. And then as Taryn said, if it's in the community's interest, you know, there are ways to get resources to that particular piece of property. Next slide, please. Here's an example of reuse planning that we did in Norfolk, Nebraska. I think that was like 2 years ago. And this was done as a class project with K-State. These class projects are really cool. They take a little bit longer because usually we're talking multiple meetings, but the communities get the input from several students, from a whole class, and they all break out in different subgroups, so to speak, and come up with their ideas for redevelopment. And students tend to think outside the box more so than we all might do. So in a lot of instances, they come up with ideas that I say we in the broadest sense of the word, like the community has not thought about before, and they represent the younger generation, which is important for a lot of communities because they lose population and they want to keep the youth in town at all possible. So this was a kind of unique approach here because this happened during the height of COVID. So there were no site visits, there were no community meetings in person, everything was via Zoom. The site visit took place via a drone. Somebody in the community had a drone and he flew that drone on a predetermined path that the class had determined what they wanted to look at and how, and it worked. It all worked out. I mean, it was amazing, and it's a lot of fun. But ideally, we come with the students into town, you know, as I said, and do public meetings. I just did one in Dublin, Missouri. Lots of people attended, high energy. And for the students, it's a great experience. It looks good on their resume. They get to talk to real people, right, who want their services. And for the community, it's a lot of fun too. Slide, please. I was talking about the resources, identification of resources. So one shape that this might take is a resource roadmap for a community. Text is a little bit fuzzy, so it's not your eyes because mine are usually pretty good with glasses on, but what it is basically a listing of resources out there that would be applicable to your project. And it will give you the online access point for that particular resource, what the amount is there a match or not, you know, all the requirements, how much money is this grant or this loan worth, and a brief description. It's very useful. Next slide, please. And last but not least, what we also can help with is community garden soil testing. Quite a few communities are looking at brownfield sites for urban gardens now, for community gardens, for CSAs, community supported agriculture. But the soil usually needs to be tested to make sure that there are no harmful contaminants in the soil. that potentially could migrate into the produce that might be grown on the site. Usually that's not an issue. There are a lot of things you can do, but you need to know what you're getting into. So we can go ahead and test the soils for like agronomic parameters, of course, but then also the main concern would be heavy metals. And then we'll compare and we can make recommendations as the best management practices based on the results. Next slide. Okay, very briefly, TAB Easy, the grant writing tool. It's a great tool, accessible on the K-State website. You need to create an account to be able to use that tool, but I believe just by virtue of attending this webinar, you have created an account already, so you ought to be able to go in with your username and password. Next slide. And then that's the BIT tool, also accessible via the K-State website, and that's a brownfield inventory. Well, I don't want to go more into these tools. They are very user-friendly, very self-explanatory. But if you have any problems with that, or you need help or anything else, just give us a call. Slide, please. All right, and that's it. And I'm going to hand it over to Tobias.
All right, Tobias, let me stop sharing here. Okay, have at it. It's all yours.
All right, thank you very much. As it was indicated, my name is Tobias Templemeyer. I'm the city administrator here in Beatrice, and I'll talk to you today a little bit about a property we have here in our community called Dempster. You can see from the picture sitting there that it's a quite large facility. It's been around for a number of years. So it was founded in 1878. The building that we are working on renovating or cleaning up today was built in 1898. It encompasses about 15.5 acres, so it's quite large. In their heyday, they made farm equipment, so windmills, water pumps, fertilizer spreaders, those types of objects is what they made there. And at its peak, it had about 500 employees, so quite a large employer in our community. Again, just a couple pictures there of what it looked like back in its heyday. Unfortunately, this is what Dempster's looks like today. So the road in front is Highway 77, a major road through our community. And this is the look that we have that greets people as they go through our community. As you kind of walk around the Dempster site, you can start to see a number of windows broken out and just Mother Nature kind of taking back over the complex there, as it has been abandoned for a number of years now. Inside's not any better. Inside there is a lot of material still left inside the building. When they did leave this facility, they essentially left everything in place and walked away from it. And so here's a couple pictures of just random barrels and electric transformers and whatnot that are still in there. The picture on the left side there is a vat of some type of liquid. I'm not sure what it is. And then you can just see, again, just trees starting to overgrow everything. And just the property in general obviously has not been taken care of for quite some time. And it no longer is a structure you could repurpose. It's beyond that point. And now is a structure that needs to be demolished and just cleaned up. But if you're like me, you're sitting here and you're going, where do I start? The process is quite large. These are a handful of the acronyms that have been thrown at me during this process. And I'm sure you have 1,000 other things on your desk that you're trying to handle and manage. And this is just another one of those, and you don't have the time to devote to it. Much like myself, I'm trying to figure out exactly what's the best way to move forward. And that's where the presenters today have been very helpful to the city of Beatrice on helping us take a look at this project and how do you start to break it down into parts and pieces so you can move forward. One of the first things they did was they helped us come up with a budget. You know, what is this project going to take overall to complete? And for our particular project, you can look at, it ranges from 4.4 up to $12.5 million. And that's a big range. I understand that. Obviously it has to do with how much you clean it up and then what you put back there. But at least they started to help us figure out what ballpark are we even in? You know, how many dollars am I talking about and what are those steps? Another thing that helped us along the way was come up with concept plans. You know, many people in my community are very visual. They like to see what it's going to look like when it's done, and just telling them, hey, once we knock down this big giant building, we're going to put a ball field back here or a dog park or whatever else is just difficult for them to get excited about or see the vision. And so having a concept plan has been very helpful. Here's another one that they came up with. And these were developed by having those public meetings, bringing people in, talking to them. How do you see this particular project being or property being reused once the building is gone? And in our case, what we kept hearing over and over again was recreational. You know, they did not see it as a residential site. They did not see it as a commercial site. And so recreational is what we heard over and over again. And so that's kind of why you see these concepts moving that direction. They've also assisted in actual removal of stuff. And so here's a couple pictures from the EPA when their vendor contractors were here removing some unwanted substances from our building. Not quite sure what those are, but again, just being involved in this process has been very helpful on getting items removed that then allow you to go to the next step and the next step. So today I have a room full in this Dempster's building, as you see here, of all these little yellow barrels that are all lined up. They're neatly labeled, waiting for the contractor to come back up and start to pick them up and remove them so they can be disposed of properly. Another place they've been helpful is in PCB removal. This particular building had a number of electrical transformers in it that were owned by the company. And we had some entrepreneurs figure out that if you break open a transformer, there is some copper inside that you could sell. However, when doing so, you spill all the PCB oil all over the place and contaminate large areas. If you're not familiar with PCB oil, it just makes you very sick. So once we noticed that they were in there and what was going on, the EPA was very good in coming in and helping us get these things cleaned up, get them removed and disposed of properly. You're not as exciting, but another very important part that they have helped us with is environmental studies, getting phase 1, getting phase 2s done. I know earlier it was mentioned that there are some safe harbors you can fall into if you buy the property a certain way, if you have studies done at certain times. And Taryn has been wonderful on helping us make sure that we can get a study done in the right time frame so we can obtain a part of this property and keep that ball moving. And so that's been very helpful. The other part through all of this has been by being involved in with these different organizations here is they have required us or helped us be involved in this property. Before we got involved with the state and the federal government and K-State on looking at this property, oftentimes we wouldn't go into Dempster's. Like it just sat down there and we had no reason to go into it. And they kind of forced us to be in the building more. And by doing that, it's how we found out that the PCBs were being spilled. It's how we found out, you know, that there are a number of other chemicals in there. We went down, I think, to do part of the phase 2 study, and my employees came back and said, hey, we're feeling lightheaded. We're not feeling real good. Figured out there was a PCB oil that leaked. They then got us in contact with the EPA, who helped come down and clean those up. While the EPA is in the building, they noticed a bunch of other contaminants, barrels, jars of whatnot of different types of substances around, saying, hey, why don't we get those cleaned up as well? And so it just starts to snowball on itself as you just involve there more and more. So that's been a big help as we go through this project. And right now where we're at is we're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. Like we're still a long ways. The building's still there. You know, I still have to work through property acquisition and demolition. I still have $500,000 worth of asbestos to remove. I still got to redevelop the property. Still got to find funding for everything. But with the help of everybody that's on this phone call today, they have helped us put together a plan and a path forward towards redeveloping this project or this property. And that's been the most helpful part of it. And so I would certainly encourage anybody else out there who has a property similar to ours to pick up the phone, reach out, call these individuals. They're more helpful than you can believe. So I would certainly encourage anybody to take advantage of those opportunities. And with that, I'd like to say thank you.
Right. Thank you, Tobias. We got a couple more minutes here. So our last final things to share. If I can remember how to share my screen. All right. Taryn, you want to do this or you want me to do this?
Oh, I can jump in here.
All right.
So if you're not a fan of the online resources and outreach, we will have an in-person workshop in Omaha, and that is scheduled for March 30th. And I will be if you got an email from me for this webinar, then shortly after this webinar, you will be getting an email from me advertising this workshop, and I will send you a copy of the completed agenda for that. So we're really excited now that COVID is mostly behind us to be having these in-person workshops again. So we hope you are able to attend that event. And then coming in June, this is in the very early stages of planning, but we are going to have a grant writing workshop that will feature writing a successful EPA Brownfields grant. And that is slated for June 14th and 15th in Kearney. So if more details about that will be coming, as I said, it's very in the early development stages. But yeah, we're excited about these events and hope you can attend one or both of them.
And the Omaha workshop that's coming up March 30th. If you are interested, y'all, I just put the registration link for that in the chat box. So you can go look at the information and get yourself registered if you are going to come out and visit us. Okay, so that's the end. I have a few things we have in these last couple minutes. You know, we'll stay on as long as we need to, but I do want to get some questions in if there are more. We've been answering them in the chat, but what's really, if you could take a few minutes and do this for us, complete an evaluation on this webinar today. You can do that by scanning that QR code there, or the link that's on the screen. I just put that in the chat box real quick. It just takes a few minutes, but this helps us to kind of continue to understand what information is helpful for communities and how we need to change up what we're doing if we're not hitting the mark. So your feedback is really, really helpful. So if you have a couple of minutes to complete an evaluation for us, I'd really, really appreciate it. And we can go ahead and unmute for questions if you would like, if we can keep it controlled. But I'd like to thank all of you for spending the afternoon with us. Here's the contact information for everyone that was speaking today. And, you know, feel free to reach out to any of us with questions or to discuss any of your potential projects at any time you like. As a reminder, the slides and the recording of this event are going to be available on the KSU TAB website within the next week, which I'm putting that link in the chat box again. And we look forward to seeing you at one of our upcoming Nebraska workshops. So go ahead and ask questions, please, if you have questions. Otherwise, we'll see you.
That's a threat.
I mean, we'll see you at an event. I'm not trying to sound threatening.
It's a promise.
But, you know, I think along those lines, I would add, if you want us or any one of us to come out and take a look at your community, at something that you think, maybe that's a brownfield, maybe that can be redeveloped, how would I go about it? We'd be happy to do that, because now that we can travel again without any restrictions, that's not a problem. So
Yep.
feel free to ask that. We will definitely try to accommodate your schedule.
We like
What?
to sometimes come out as a group of 3. Go ahead, I heard
Yes.
somebody.
I was going to say, watch out what you asked for, Taryn. When can you get to West Point?
I like to travel. I can make it happen.
I have a building that we own that needs to come down, and the only thing holding us back right now is asbestos.
Oh,
So-
well, sounds like we may be able to help with it. That we have that asbestos abatement grant. So
Give her a call. Her
give me a call. Yep.
information is right there if you don't already know how to reach her.
I got it written down. I will be calling.
Sounds good.
There you go.
And then just, for those of you still here, if Taryn is talking to you about some work and she feels like, hey, EPA could be helpful here, or K-State TAB could be helpful here, she'll bring us in, or vice versa. If you come to K-State TAB and we think EPA or NDEE could be helpful, we'll bring them. We all work really, really closely together. So it doesn't really matter who you start with. We always make sure that the right people get pulled together for whatever is going on. But Taryn is always a great place to start.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay, it's 3:01. So
Right on time.
I'm going to end this. Again, our contact information is all there. If you go home tonight and you cannot sleep because you are just, brain is circling about something that we talked about today, send us an email and we are happy to answer your questions at any point that they come in. This is not the only chance you have to ask questions. So again, a reminder, we will make all of this recording and slides available on the website. Give us about a week to get stuff posted, but it'll be there for you. And please complete your evaluation. And we look forward to seeing you at our in-person events coming up later this year.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. With that,
Bye, thank
Hey,
you.
Nisha, I see you. Thank
I'm
you.
gonna shut this down, y'all.
Okay.
If I can figure
Bye,
out how to end
everyone.
it. Bye.